Well, good afternoon, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started for our conversation this afternoon, and that is really what it is. I would like to talk very little and have you all talk a little bit more, because as you can see, it's an open forum on the COVID pandemic, challenges and opportunities for future success. And what I would like to do, because again, we have the people who have been really working on this on campuses every day for the past 16, 17 months. It is, I guess, 18 months, or 19 months now, I think, at this point. Because my daughter is 17 months, she was born in May. And I always reference now 2020 by those big things in my life. But what I want to do is hear from you all. Now, I've got a number of questions that I want to ask, but I'll get into that shortly. First, for those of you who do not know me or were not here in the morning session, again, my name is Dr. Oleka. I have the distinct pleasure of being the president of the Association of Independent Kentucky Colleges and Universities, AIKCU for short, and I get to represent all of our private colleges and universities that are SACS accredited in both Frankfort and DC. Two of our wonderful presidents are here today, Marcia Hawkins from Union College, and of course Susan Donovan from Bellarmine University, great leaders in their own right. Also, both on the executive committee for me, so that's even more important, and Marcia was on the search committee for me, so they're both very, very important. And of course, I have 2 degrees from Susan's University, so again, you've got some of the best of the best here with us.
And Sandra Gray from Asbury.
Oh yes, Sandra Gray from Asbury. Now Asbury, Sandra was gone before I got here, and I've only seen you a few times in person, so when half of your face is covered, I get to recognize you, so my apologies. But Sandra and Asbury obviously are great friends of IQ. Asbury is a member, and Kevin Brown, the new president over there, newish, I guess, is a friend who's doing a great job too. But I always like to give those greetings and let folks know kind of who they're talking to. And again, my context by and large is entirely the pandemic. It came in December 2019, as I said, and then March this whole thing got started. And so what we've tried to do is just be a convener, an informer, and an advocate for our folks on the ground. It was really interesting talking to members of Congress and our General Assembly who thought that an endowment was basically cash on hand. So that was good to explain that was not the case. And also the importance of our institutions to kind of figure out some problems on their own. What I meant by that was our institutions felt good about how they were going to do distancing. They felt good about how they were going to provide the education for students, even if they couldn't be on campus, how they're going to keep campus clean. But of course the challenge was, how do we do it with no resources for these types of things at our institutions? All of you all, of course, have some varying degree of understanding of this. And so that's what the conversation is going to be. Now, to set things up, I'm well aware that, especially before COVID, there was a competitive landscape for a finite amount of students. So there's certainly a high level of competition that exists amongst you all. That's good. I do want to say, though, that in this conversation, we're all on the same page. The idea is, how can we lead institutions, whether we are advising or outright leaders, to make sure that our students, our faculty, and staff are safe? What are some things that we did well that we'd like to replicate in the future? What are some things that we'd like to change and do a little bit differently? All those things are important for each of you to be honest with one another. That way, you can have people be honest with you. That's the only way that we can all improve and get better. So I say that to say, be forthcoming and be honest about what you have to say. No one is going to be required to respond to every question, but unless you want to have about 50 minutes just sort of looking at one another, somebody's got to say something on some of these things. So we all feel good about that. I'll just read off the questions, as I've got a number here, and then obviously you all can ask questions amongst yourselves. But since there is a small number of us, I at one time was a middle school teacher, but also adjunct faculty at Bellarmine. I would like for us to know who each other is. Who would like to go first to say who they are and where they're from, what they do?
Marcia Hawkins. Marcia Hawkins, hi there, president of Union College in Barberville, Kentucky.
Very good.
Susan Donovan, president of Bellarmine University in Louisville, Kentucky. Seth Gumry, Vice President and founding team member of Degree Insurance.
Toby Shelton, a Regional Director with Campus Logic. Live in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Great.
Seth Ketchum, the Vice President of Sales for roughly the eastern half of the country for Campus Logic. And I'm just in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, right down the road.
Great.
I'm Steve Trachtenberg. I was the university president for 30 years, 20 at George Washington University and 10 at the University of Hartford in Connecticut. I got old and I'm retired.
So you're the happiest one among us here then?
Yeah, I'm a spectator to all this now.
Well, good to have you.
Yeah, I'm Sandra Gray, President Emeritus at Asbury University, retired 2 years ago.
Great.
Mary Dark, President of HEI.
Very good. Okay, so we've got a good number of folks with different perspectives in terms of how their work impacted campus life. So let us start there. Take yourself back to last March. In Kentucky, Berea College was the first institution, I think it was like March 10th or something, to say, we're shutting everything down. I remember talking to one of the presidents, who will not be named, who's not in this room. And they said, what's Lyle doing over in Berea? That guy's nuts. Like, I can't believe he's gonna shut down the entire semester over some, little flu light virus. I said, well, I guess Lyle knows something that we don't. That was my response. So take yourself back to that time. What was your immediate reaction when it occurred to you that this was not just a run-of-the-mill thing? What did you do? How did your campus react? So it's a very broad question. Let's start there at the beginning. What was your immediate reaction? What did you do? How did your campus react?
Well, I remember when Lyle did that, and I was one of the ones saying, oh my gosh, what is he doing? Overreacting? No. So and at the time, I think we were already on spring break, maybe. And so we just got together as a group and talked through a bunch of stuff and said, okay, how can we do this? And the first thing we did was extend spring break for a week so that we could figure it out. And so that's, so when students came back, it was really to come pick up their stuff. And we did transition to online. So it was fast, and it was the first time in the history of Union College that we made a decision that fast. It was great.
It can't happen.
It can happen. That was us.
We were in spring break, and we did not extend the spring break, but we used the spring break to get faculty up to speed with how to do the online, with our teaching support in there doing it. Yeah, we called a meeting and then communicated with folks. And it was interesting, we went around, I remember going to the faculty meeting, and we went around to it, and we made the decision that the students in the residence halls could stay, but the classes would be online. And the faculty were so concerned that the students were gonna have a party in the library. And I said, well, you call me. I was a student affairs person for 2 decades. I was like, you call me when that happens, because I wanna see it. Because I don't think that's gonna happen, which it didn't happen, but they were just concerned that they were all gonna catch it from the students in the library. And they had parents and which I get, but that didn't become a concern. But yeah, and then we stayed closed until the fall, and then we tried to do online, and with some success, the hybrid model. But by spring, some of the faculty got really concerned, and then it hurt our spring enrollment and students on campus, because it was just totally online, and I think the students just got
I think you two are only sitting presidents. So let me modify the question. Those of our folks who are in emeritus position or have since retired, how do you think you would have reacted? I mean, obviously throughout your time as president, you saw a number of different challenges on campus, none of which were like this. But just given how you would have responded in the past, how do you think you would have perceived this had you been at the helm?
I was one that was wondering, Lyle, what are you doing? Because I think in my role, I was usually the one trying to diffuse what others would make a big deal out of. And so it was like, this is gonna pass with, you know, we'll get back to normal. And so, I mean, obviously I was very, very wrong, but I thought, in a month it'll be gone. And then obviously it became evident that it's gonna last longer. But I think I would have been, would not have closed as early as Lyle. But Asbury was not on spring break, they were the next week. And so they told students they did extend spring break a week, but they said, take all of your things home. We're not sure if you'll be able to come back. So that was a good timing for them to be able to let the students go and know that they may just be online.
I think a lot of it has to do with the resources you got available. So my university has a big medical center.
Yeah.
So I would have sort of gotten the dean of the medical school, a variety of the more respected medical faculty, to hold a public forum, probably online under the circumstances, and try to explain where we were and what we were doing. I think one of the problems we're dealing with is that there's conflict about the virus. It's become politicized. And the way to diffuse that is to try and get it as scientific as possible. And frankly, I was in Washington, D.C. I would have gotten Fauci to come over and do the dog and pony show. I think presidents of liberal arts colleges need to look to people like yourself to try and draw in information, give them some sort of a backstop, right? So I can imagine, for example, the Association of Colleges in Washington putting some presentation, ACE, the American Council on Education, somebody like that, probably let us down by not putting some national presentation together that they could have done throughout the country. And it left a lot of institutional presidents, I think, on their own, rather than standing up and creating a uniform presentation. I go on an annual fishing trip, 30 guys, we go all the time, once a year for a week. And then, you know, it's a lot of sitting around the fire talking and drinking at night. You had to have had your shots before you could go this year, because we were all, camping together. But in the evening, we got to talking, and we were shocked to discover that in this group of university presidents, judges, senators, corporate CEOs, there were 6 guys. It's all guys, but there once was a fight over some woman.
Naturally.
Anyway, so it's all guys. And there were 6 guys who actually were anti-vax. And we were astounded. The other guys were astounded. And one of the guys is a very distinguished professor of medicine and stuff like that. And he was tearing his hair out. And these guys, I mean, one of the guys who was anti-vax, United States ambassador. Now, it's true, he was one of Trump's ambassadors. But he went on for about 20 minutes about why he wouldn't have gotten the vaccine, except he wanted to come on a fishing trip. Anyway, you can imagine university faculties were as divided as lay people. Being a PhD didn't help you make your mind up about it. So I think as presidents, we needed more help from our national organizations. And to the extent that you're a spokesman back to the Washington groups, I think you ought to scold them a little.
I will send your ire back to them.
Well, no,
OJ did provide, his office did provide good support. We had regular presidents meetings, and we had point people that were keeping up to date. And then we had a a nursing dean and medical lab sciences that were on our committee, which was an interesting, which was an interesting dynamic, because I didn't realize for a long time that there was a divided opinion on the vaccine requirement. So I finally said, I'm gonna go to the meeting because I just don't understand. And then I saw the division, and it was basically my cabinet and the health professionals and the other faculty, the athletic trainer, you know, all of them, who had legitimate concerns. And then in the end, I went with the required vaccines once approved.
Yeah, there is, you all bring up an interesting idea in terms of there being a divide. We're certainly seeing it now with the vaccines. We've seen it before with masks. We saw at the beginning in terms of, again, the virus and the strength of it, kind of its purpose and what it could do. Let me bring those ideas together and ask you as a former dean, but also as somebody who advises and counsels higher education institutions, kind of what was your perspective last March? And then also want to turn it over to our higher ed partners to say, what was it like from your vantage point as well? We'll start here.
Okay. Well, first of all, my big concern was so many institutions are financially challenged. I really hate to see them put in a position of having to choose between money and life and death. That's I can't think of another situation where that's ever happened, but that's kind of the way it was. And I really felt like this was something we've never faced before, and I was impressed by a number of really creative ways that people found solutions. Of course, the number one was go home, we're going online, and that was necessary. I was pleased that almost everyone made the decision to choose life over money in that situation. And I also was concerned because we look at preventive law a lot. I was worried about the legal cases that were going to come from this. And our legal advisors told us, they said, well, we don't think there's going to be a problem because the courts do not and never have wanted to make decisions that have to do with quality of education, which essentially that was the issue, because the quality of going home and doing online as opposed to being in the classroom and having the full college experience, it was a difference in quality. So we were concerned there'd be all these lawsuits, and they said, no, the courts won't hear them. They'll have summary dismissal, it's a summary judgment. And then what happened was, that was not
our institutions. What was your vantage point last March as you thought, what is this thing that's happening and how you all reacted to it?
I can talk. I was consulting with a startup that did a lot of work around student success, and I would say, like a lot of our partners, we were in denial that it would go on for as long as it has. So I think we were in somewhat of the same position. How do we continue to support students? How do we continue to be a partner if no one's on campus, right? What do our services that we're providing to the institution look like if we're not there, or they're not there, or, right? And for some of us that we're more online focused, or are more online focused, maybe it didn't affect us as much, or there were countless number of companies that went from being this big to incredibly huge overnight because of this, because they were focused on online. So I think for us it was denial at first over what that meant, and then the slow realization, which felt mimicked, I think, everywhere. I think to Steve's point about vaccination, I think one of the things it did, also one of the things we're still dealing with, was it just made very apparent the divide that has been there for a long time. It is continuing to raise this question of, as colleges and universities and leaders in education, which are sort of about bridging those divides and bringing people together to have conversation, how do we continue to do that?
When you say the divide, what divide?
Well, I think I was talking specifically about the divide over vaccination or mask mandate that we are seeing. Right, but we've got political divides, we seem to be getting more and more polarized as a country, right? And
It's a different session.
it's a totally different section.
But you're right.
But no, I was thinking of the challenges, right, that have come up, obviously, what Steve said, and that seems to be one of the ongoing challenges that we're still dealing with, right? So, yeah, but that was for us.
Yeah, no, and I'm at Campus Logic, I'm a regional director, and I think, as I think back about that shift in time for us being face-to-face with folks, my job was immediately changing to the Zoom world and how that was going to really shift our relationship building that we do with folks like yourself. And I think that was a huge shift. After I got it through my wife's grocery list, which was very long, then I had to figure out how to set up the home office for her because she was suddenly going to be working at home as well. So I think there was also that home transition on the personal side to having two people working at home. And, fortunately for me, I've got a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, but I just can't imagine the other coworkers I had that have little kids running around the house and having to manage that life with two at-home employees. But from a Campus Logic standpoint, I think the company itself, as many businesses tried to figure out how to handle things, the leadership at the organization really drove that messaging across the company. And
Yeah, I think salespeople by nature are typically very extroverted. You're used to talking to people out in front, presenting to people quite a bit. So the sudden shift of we shouldn't call anybody because it would be bad form to chase down a contract right now, and they're trying to figure out how to get thousands of students moved off campus and shift to remote learning overnight. They don't want to talk about financial aid processing or whatever widget you're selling. So that shift of how to be sensitive to the situation, and then also you have a job to do at the same time was, are we ever going to proceed again with engagements on campuses? That was nerve-wracking from the vendor or partner perspective. I had initially had a little regret for not taking the call with Zoom 2 months prior, to the pandemic starting, but okay. That was a little mistiming there on the growth potential. But I think overall, I've worked from home for the better part of the last 15 years, have small children at home, constantly interrupting calls. It's refreshing to see that that's been normalized a little bit. Everybody's working from home. There's always going to be interruptions and distractions, but it's more of an integration than a work-life balance. But it's been a journey for sure. It's nice to get back to face-to-face interaction over the last couple of months.
I do want to ask about that again as we're talking about divides, because this can become an issue of practical leadership and governance for institutions. You've got faculty and staff who might be at odds with cabinet members who say people should come to work every day, people shouldn't. Again, thinking about kind of the duration of the pandemic, this could be either last year or this year. People say, well, I've been working at home, I'd like to stay working at home, or people are concerned about their own safety. One of the issues that we kept hearing about was, what do you do with the faculty member who is high risk and has no idea how to utilize online anything because they resisted it for so long within their career, and now they're sort of forced to do it. So I'd like to hear about that, again, from the perspective of folks who might have had to deal with it, maybe from the perspective of, again, an organization that works with institutions and trying to drum up that business and whether or not that increased or decreased. But talk a little bit about that in terms of the practical nature of governing and leading an institution with those differing perspectives, being at home, not being at home, and how that might have changed how the product, so to speak, was delivered.
So early on, well, during the summer, from March of, oh my gosh, to the summer, we did a lot of training, a lot of professional development, how to do virtual classes and that sort of thing. We had just a couple of faculty members self-select to not continue because they just didn't want to do it. And they were close to retirement and decided, this is a good time, we're just gonna opt out. But we did have professors who I thought would never go to virtual class setting, and I think a lot of it depended on the instructor and the professional development classes, but they just took it on like crazy, and people that we never would have suspected are great at it now. And so when we started the fall semester, we gave everybody the option of in class in person or in class virtually. So the professor had the class, had people in the class, also had people virtually in the class. And of course, we made allowances for anybody with underlying health issues, didn't have to teach in person, you could come in. But when all of that, and that worked really well. And this year, we're doing the same kind of thing, but instead of giving everybody the option, you get a pass if you have an issue that you're uncomfortable with. So for the most part, we are face-to-face, except we found that just a couple of professors really enjoyed teaching virtually, and they don't want to be face-to-face. They have no underlying health condition. They love teaching virtually, and we have said, no, that's not what we're about here. So that's caused a little disruption and discomfort. And this one particular professor decided at a faculty meeting to advocate for shutting down. We all just need to shut down because we're obviously not making the right decisions. So, but we didn't. We're still there. That's us.
We had a similar experience. We had some that were hesitant, and then they grew to love it. And I do think that time away for faculty raised some anxiety for them coming back this fall, in terms of particularly those either older with potentially compromised or family members that were potentially compromised, including those with young children who could not be vaccinated. So we've worked through that, but like you, we gave the choice the year before on what they did in terms of faculty and students, really, whether it was online or not. And then the other thing we did, which maybe others did as well, was we had listening sessions with our chief diversity officer and our chief of staff did listening sessions with various groups, faculty with children, faculty without, staff, and about our remote policy, the work balance, reentry, sort of. And I think those went well with the policy. And then similar with the vaccines, we had committees that reviewed the exceptions, one for faculty and staff, and one for students that were largely faculty and staff members that made those decisions.
You could take a minute though and think about how many presidents have burned out.
Yeah.
Largely because, I think, they've had unsympathetic audiences. They've had to do disagreeable things on behalf of the future of the institution. And faculty they're always in favor of progress, but they're against change for the most part.
Stealing that, that's very, very
And they're independently employed.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so the notion somehow that you have to lay people off or cut things out in order to get over a difficult period is, and some of it has to do with the very nature of the life they've had, which is to say, unless they've gone out, well, I hate to sound like an old Republican, but they've never met a payroll. And so if you've gone from being a graduate student directly into a faculty role, it's actually been an elegant life. And I say this as the son of a law professor, and the kids followed spoiled rotten.
Because I'm the son of a former dean, so I get the spoiled rotten.
Yeah. I mean, it took for 2 years when he practiced law and he hated it. and then immediately fled back into the academy. So it's an interesting process, but I think, you know, if somebody's in the search business, they're gonna have a field day looking for new presidents in the years to come. Now, it's an opportunity of a sort. So I think they're gonna see the appointment of more persons of color and women. In fact, the chairman of the board of George Washington University, the president quit after 5 years, said the other day, oh yes, she said, we're gonna do a great search and I'm confident we're gonna get a black woman. I thought of calling her up and saying, listen, I'm no longer practicing law myself. But, at any rate, I think there are gonna be opportunities in a funny way, because you're gonna see a lot of retirements of this faculty member that you were talking about. And a whole new generation of people are coming forward. I don't want to blow my talk tomorrow, but I'm sort of talking about this tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see the new innovations in the way we deliver the product and the products we develop, the services we provide. And interestingly enough, I think more institutions are going to return to teaching with less emphasis on research than we've had in the last decades. I think the imperative of teaching, in contrast to articles which nobody's reading, I don't want to sound like an anti-intellectual here, but is going to flip things in an interesting way. Part of that problem has been, you know, what we've incentivized in the past and what we rewarded people for, and what they had to do in order to get promoted. But you know, you talk about strange problems. We went through some difficult problems, you'll remember, with AIDS, and we didn't learn any lessons from it. But I keep thinking about a faculty member who came to see me, who said, President Trachtenberg, he said, my doctors tell me I've got about 10 months to live. He said, he was gay. He said, I have no spouse, I have no children, and I don't have much money. He said, I'd like to take a trip around the world before I die. He said, is there any way that you could give me my insurance? When I die, there's going to be an insurance policy, and that's going to pay a sum. He said, is there any way the university could give me, you know, $20,000 or $30,000, and I'll make beneficiary of my insurance policy, the university, so you'll get your money back. And I thought, nobody has ever asked me that question. I thought about it, and I thought, believe me, George Washington University is not going to miss $30,000. I said, yeah, sure. Well, I went to the vice president and I went to the general counsel. They both told me I was crazy. And I said, listen, guys, if the university isn't going to do it, I'm going to give him the $30,000 myself. He's going to leave his life insurance, which is far in excess of that, to the university in exchange. That's more than enough security. Anyhow, he went away, traveled around the world, and he died just the way he said he was going. I mean, he kept his promise. But that's the way it worked out. So you do get, under these circumstances, people coming to you with questions that are simply nobody's ever asked before. And it calls for a nimbleness on the part of university presidents like you all that nobody understands. Nobody understands the isolation of the university president, the fact that you're making these decisions without knowing who to talk to about it. And I think one of the shortcomings of I love being a university president, I did it for 30 years, but the isolation of it is largely underestimated. I'm out of books, I'm tired of it, but if I were to write a new book, it would be about the isolation of leadership. And the fact that you were so misunderstood in the job. So somehow the faculty have somehow absorbed all the Marxism, and they believe in the management labor dichotomy without understanding that the leaders of the institution are doing everything in their wits' power to advance the institution, to advance the interests of the faculty. And the faculty are absolutely convinced that you're trying to hurt them in some way.
Well, let's take that idea actually, because I want to use that and expand on this question. Again, you're free to look at it from your own vantage point in terms of the governance model, but I want to ask the question about leadership generally and COVID, because that is something. Like I said, I took the job in December. It was a very different job. Then my daughter was born in May. My mother came to live with us. She had just retired, but she was 68, I guess, at the time.
So, yeah.
So young, I know. But the way that we thought about how we're going to approach COVID-19 and the interaction with it, you've got a 68-year-old mother. We've already lost my father. And my wife's father, who we have now lost, but at the time was also elderly, and he was already bedridden. Her mother was a nurse. So there's all these complications, and we've got this little bitty baby, and again, at the time, there was no vaccine, so we thought, how are we gonna live? And then it's a very interesting life we had last year. She was a new principal at a middle school, so she thought, what are we gonna do going in person? What's our response gonna be? And then, of course, I have this new job with the association. How can I respond to our presidents? Be nimble, build those relationships with the Trump White House, Senator McConnell, and Democrat Andy Beshear. They're all very different. So I bring that up to go back to your question and to ask you all, and I would like to hear from as many people on this as possible, the concept of leadership. How did COVID-19 change you as a leader in higher education? Again, any vantage point. It could be president, consultant, retired president, vendor. How did it change you as a leader? Or did it change you as a leader?
Okay, I think, I don't know, has it changed me? I mean, overall, but for a period of time, I had to be a heck of a lot more opinionated. I mean, you can take time, ideally, to listen to everybody and to really get as much info as you can. We didn't have a lot of time. So I found, and talk about lonely, you know, I found myself having to make some decisions kind of on the fly that you're later going, oh, I just hope that was the right thing to do, you know. But you had to do it, and you had to do it with confidence, you know. But I think you should write that book.
I do too.
Thank you.
Are all in favor?
Yeah, yes. Put us all on the forward as well. What other thoughts? Leadership, how did it change you? Or how did COVID change your style of leadership? Maybe it didn't, so if it didn't, obviously you don't have to talk, but.
Yeah, I mean, it radically changed mine in a lot of ways, and the fact that I work with leaders, we had to be very flexible, and we had to switch, because we used to do all our training in person. And we overnight had to go completely to Zoom and format everything for that, and make sure we weren't gonna lose any quality, which, I mean, I don't know if you can really be sure you're not gonna lose any quality. There's a lot to be said for meeting in person and building those personal relationships in person. And it's easier to create a community that way than it is on Zoom. So it created new challenges. We had to rise to that occasion to try to compensate for that. And then we had to plan for the future and try to think, okay, this is where we were gonna go. Now how are we gonna go there like this? And so flexibility was just huge, and stretching was huge. So it changed the way we did everything, and probably forced me to be more flexible than I normally. I'm usually pretty flexible, but I wasn't that flexible where I would completely flip our teaching, our way of coaching and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, flexibility was certainly, I think, flexibility, being nimble, having to have opinions where we thought we didn't have to have them. I think that did change for all of us. What other thoughts or ways that leadership changed? Yeah.
I would say it became much more personal. all of a sudden, as you mentioned, what was going on in your life, right? And I have 4 small girls, all under the age of 9, right? And my office all of a sudden was in the closet in my master bedroom. We call it the cloffice.
Yes, I like that.
And it is, I found that I was counseling employees much more, leading, but also just spending much more time on everything outside of what was our day-to-day, because that was also how we were getting through our day-to-day. I would be curious if that feels like a shift that has stayed, that I'm not sure is going away. And I find now as I interview people, it's much more informal and relaxed than it was 2 years ago.
Somebody said to me, your big buzzword, and you were talking about earlier, is inclusiveness, and it's becoming belonging, but they're saying there's nothing more inclusive than inviting somebody into your home through your screen in every possible imaginable way. You can't hide the dog running around, your kids in the background. I remember I was on a call, and my mother was there, like I said, she was changing the baby's diaper, and all of a sudden in the background you heard, "Big poops!" Can't take that back. Doing things in the nursery, like it is a very different way to lead, and it's absolutely more personal for sure.
May I ask a question? I'm really a generation removed from a lot of this, and I'm trying to figure out, in a funny way, what's going on. Right? So I've got a 45-year-old son who leads a group of 40 people from his basement. He's never met any of these 40 people. He's the vice president of a publicly traded company. He's never met he only met the CEO the other day after a year and a half of working for him. I don't understand. Now, it seems to me you can only draw on an inventory of human relationships so long before they become an abstraction instead of a reality. How do you have 40 people working for you, 20 of them in Ukraine, 10 in Canada, 10 scattered around the United States? How does that go on without the kind of human interaction that we value so much in the universities? It's not just about the stuff that's in the books, it's about the exchange. And if that is missing, both in universities and in corporate life, and I have a feeling there's a generational thing going on here that I simply cannot get my head around.
I'll take that, because
Yeah, you've been doing it 15 years.
remote teams for quite a while, and you have to dedicate some portion of every interaction to personal time. It can't just be straight to the point and talk about, I don't know, your kid won the soccer state championship, right? Like, just talk about personal things that are going on in life. You gotta make a point of it in almost every single interaction. It's hard to just jump into a meeting, because you have that chit chat. If you're in the office and you go in the conference room, they have a meeting every so time, it's 5 to 10 minutes of what did you do this weekend, did you see the game last night? You have to kind of manufacture that a little bit until it becomes natural in the Zoom interaction. I'm sick of Zoom, I've done it for a long time. I think I was one of the first adopters of it, but it's great to get face to face, but in the digital world, you have to, because I was in a similar situation. I actually came on board with Campus Logic in July of 2020, so I didn't meet anybody in person until we did our QSR in person, or sales meeting in person in July of 2021. So it was strange to have my entire interview process be via Zoom, met the CEO via Zoom, or CRO via Zoom, and hired quite a few people via Zoom. So that was the first time we got together. So it's different, but you've got to kind of manufacture and dedicate the time to it in each call, and that becomes more natural.
Yeah, you gotta be intentional. That's the word that we've used in terms of building the relationships. Now, you're right, there is no way to absolutely replicate being able to be in person, to see, feel, touch, and experience the essence of somebody. You lose that, certainly. But you do have to be intentional to ask very deliberate questions, to build in time in those conversations and relationships to get to know people. It's something you absolutely have to do. But it is a good question, especially as it speaks to the academy. Do we have any other thoughts on this idea? Because that rolls me into another question I wanted to ask. Again, what maybe changed about your leadership style?
I would say it become, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think for me, it really did change my pace of life.
Yeah.
and still want to be useful and productive and all of those things, but we live in the country, and when I would be driving, it was just awful to get behind a school bus. And it's like, oh, good grief, come on, I've got places to go. You know? And then once and I didn't even realize this, but once the kids got back to school, and I found myself behind the school bus for the first time, it's like these darling kids getting off the bus. And I'm just, I'm sitting there just in my heart, just cheering them on. I'm just, this is what life's about. And so I think it just really internally did a work on me that forced me to have to value time and to value what happens in life. Kids are always wonderful and school buses are, but I realized how I had just been trying to push the buses out of my way. And there I was cheering it on. Yeah. And so I think I needed some deep internal work in that way to really just take a breath and step back and to really value the things that we needed to value. And there were times in which I just thought the sky must be bluer this year and the grass is greener. And then I thought, well, it's probably always been that color. Yeah. But I'm just now recognizing it. And so I do hope there are those kinds of value things that will stay with us that we need, just relationally, emotionally, all of that. I do hope there's a permanent change.
Yes. I think that's very well said. And actually, again, kind of leads me into this next question. One of the things that we learned, I think, in some cases in the unfortunate way, was that people really like to be on campus for college. They enjoy it. This idea, obviously, the online experience is important. It's certainly possible to educate students, but in terms of the entirety of the college experience, it's meant to be done in person as much as possible. As was said earlier, it's not just what's in the books, but it's the leadership development, it's the student affairs stuff, it's that interaction with people. And then obviously, to a significant degree, that was a lesson, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. So here's my question for you all. What is the value proposition of college now? We are in a different stage of the pandemic, obviously, now that we're here in person on campus. Again, we've got presidents, I think just listening to folks, a lot of the experiences either with private liberal arts institution or to some degree a smaller institution generally. What do we think the value proposition is now that people have been able to be away, do online entirely in the semester? What is it now for higher education generally, and then you can speak about, again, what you offer specifically. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, I think we have time for one short response because we're right at time. This clock's wrong.
Oh.
And so, sorry about that. Yeah, I know, I got fooled by that too. So it's 3:20, so one quick response and then we're going to go in and there'll be an awards presentation for the institutional award for entrepreneuring right after this.
Thank you for that. Yes, I was looking at that.
It happened to me too.
I was like, oh, we'll be done right on time after this.
So one short response. Who has one?
I think we value relationships more, and I think it really became clear the last year, and then this year bringing back our students. And they just love being with each other. Our faculty love being with the student. I mean, it's just, we just love each other. Now we're just having more conversations, and I don't know, it's like not seeing a relative for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I think it's the relationship aspect. That's what, to me, higher education, it's a product without the relationships,
Do we agree relationships is important for the value proposition? See general nods.
That's all there is.
That's all there is. Well, this has been great for the relationships that we have built and the conversations that you all have shared. And so I very much appreciate it. Thank you all for spending the time and being so honest. Now let's go see who won the award.
We've got a 10-minute break and then we're in for the award. Dr. Oleka, thank you very much.